Hey guys, we're going to talk about another diet today, the specific carb diet. The SCD, the specific carb diet, is primarily focused on healing gut issues like Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, IBS, and other, GI disorders, chronic diarrhea, stuff like that. So, the real difference between SCD and GAPS, which is later and kind of built on some of the core concepts from SCD, is that GAPS is gut and psychology syndrome. So really, GAPS is focused on the gut health, but then also on psychological issues that tend to spring from those gut disorders. So SCD is still very good. It's still, recommended for people with GI issues, with Crohn's, with celiacs, with colitis, with chronic diarrhea, constipation, all of that stuff. So it's a great diet, one that I did for a while. And I eventually switched to GAPS and then paleo in search of more relief for my symptoms. SCD diet, you look at GAPS, you look at paleo, you look at other exclusionary diets. There's, a pretty similar core concept in there, or like group of concepts. One is that you remove all processed foods, or nearly all processed foods. Some of them are adamant about all processed foods, but most are, pretty restrictive or exclusionary towards processed food, right? So processed food is anything, right? It's even like, processed sausages, though, fresh homemade sausage or like fresh from the deli kind of sausage, totally allowed on many of the diets. Processed sausages like Applegate Farms or something that you get that's frozen and then you heat up later, not allowed. The reason why is that there's a lot of additives to those meats that can cause GI irritation. So, strictly not allowed. So the second concept is no grains. No grains is pretty prevalent across a lot of healing diets. The reason being, manyfold, right? So grains have high levels of lectin, they have high levels of glyphosate and potentially other toxins, because a lot of those toxins are drawn up and end up being stored in the grains as they are growing. And so when those grains are ground up and turned into bread and other grain products, we end up eating all of those toxins and getting them in our bodies. So very bad. The third reason is, or the third core principle is sugar, right? So completely cutting out sugar, all added sugars, and really only using honey. Some of the diets allow, agave and stuff, but SCD is pretty strict about only allowing honey as a sweetener. So that's it, right? No agave, no stevia, none of the other fake sugars, just honey as your only sweetener. And that can get pretty monotonous. I mean, overall, the entire diet is pretty monotonous, right? I mean, there's definitely some variation you can do. You can have fun stuff like bacon, which is very enjoyable. You can have a couple different cheeses. But overall, the diet is much more bland compared to, a traditional American diet or like a diet that includes processed food or other stuff, right? Because cutting out all grains and sugars is a big deal. So, I started off this diet just the way that I do with a lot of other diets. I read the Breaking the Vicious Cycle book, written by Elaine Gottschall. I think it came out in 1987, but it was based on prior research from a pediatrician named Dr. Sydney Haas. And she wrote up the initial diet for pediatric patients in the 1920s. And then, the diet wasn't popularized and became like pseudo mainstream, at least in like health circles, until Elaine Gottschall's book in 1987. So I read that book, Breaking the Vicious Cycle. I got excited for healing my gut because I had had gut issues for a long time. And I started the SCD diet and it went pretty well, right? It definitely helped with stool quality. It helped with the generalized autoimmune symptoms, the fatigue, the lack of energy, the mental clarity, all of that stuff definitely improved on the diet. Um, but after a while, those improvements kind of plateaued. And so I went searching for other stuff that can help, right? And so I, switched to the GAPS diet and then the paleo diet, and then have taken principles from other different diets, including like the high fiber diet and other things, and incorporated that into kind of like my own mix, right? And I think that's important for a lot of people who try these diets and um, either they see some results, but they don't get as much of a result, like they don't get complete remission of their disease or, even long-term remission, right? They don't get complete cessation of diarrhea. They don't get whatever they're looking for, right? And so I think it's really important to continue experimenting. These diets were kind of written somewhat in a vacuum, right? I mean, they're written by practitioners who are dealing with patients, but they're not generally patients themselves. And so the tinkering and experimentation that goes on to really customize the diet to you and get the best results for you, because everyone has their own genetics, they have their own mixture of microbiota, they have their own past history of trauma, and like whether or not they were breastfed, and like all this stuff that really combines together to form your health history, and that really affects how you interact with these diets. And so you really need to modify these diets based on how your body reacts to them. And so I think that's really important. I think SCD is a great tool in that toolbox to begin experimenting with a much healthier diet and lifestyle. And SCD, like many other diets of this ilk, is very much not just a diet, it's a lifestyle, right? This changes how you live in a way. Because you have to make a lot of your own food, and if you've been living the autoimmune lifestyle for a while, like you don't have a really robust social life, right? Because you are you know in fear of having to run to the bathroom, or like in constant pain, either typical like autoimmune flu-like symptoms, or you have a specific autoimmune disease like colitis or Crohn's or whatever, and it's constant cramping and all of that. So it will change your life in many ways, right? You'll spend more time cooking food. You'll also spend more time feeling healthy, and you'll be able to have more energy and motivation to experiment more, to include more stuff in your diet, to, go do stuff in the outside world, not be stuck in your house all the time. And yeah, so I think it's a great tool. Again, some of the science has really progressed past what the SCD diet is intended to treat. And so that's why, there was a follow-up of the GAPS diet and the paleo diet and the autoimmune paleo diet, and all of these diets that continue to come out and further evolve this line of thought on what's healthy and what's not. But SCD is a great start. As I said, a lot of the core principles are the same across all of these diets, and really those three principles, right? Cutting out sugars, cutting out, refined foods, processed foods of all kinds, and cutting out grains is going to be the core part of any healing diet, because all three of those categories of foods are just terrible for every human being. And really, once you develop autoimmune disease, it's like your body's tipped past the point of being able to just heal the day-to-day damage. And you really need to cut all of that stuff out to begin the proper healing process. So absolutely advocate for trying this diet and living the lifestyle. If you have autoimmune disease, you will absolutely feel better. Absolutely continue experimenting with this diet, with other similar diets, and how the food differences affect you. And yeah, just try and live your best life. So I think that's it. I've included links to the books in the description. If you have questions or comments, please leave them below. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.